Everyone was gathered around Judge Bermutier, who was sharing his opinion on the Saint-Cloud mystery. For a month, this unexplained crime had been the talk of Paris. No one could understand what had happened. Judge Bermutier, standing with his back to the fireplace, spoke, citing evidence and discussing various theories, but without reaching any conclusion. Some women stood and approached him, watching his clean-shaven face as he spoke such important words. They trembled, stirred by fear and curiosity, and that insatiable desire for horror that haunts the soul of every woman. One of them, paler than the rest, said during a pause, "It's terrible. It seems supernatural. The truth will never be known." The judge turned to her. "Indeed, madam, it's likely the real facts will never be revealed. As for the word supernatural that you just used, it has no place in this case. We're dealing with a very cleverly planned and executed crime, so full of mystery that we cannot uncover its circumstances. But once I did handle a case where the unexplainable seemed to be involved. In fact, the situation became so tangled that we had to abandon the investigation altogether." Several women exclaimed at once, "Oh, tell us." Judge Bermutier smiled with the dignity appropriate to a magistrate, and continued, "Don't think, however, that I ever attributed any part of the case to supernatural causes. I believe only in natural explanations. But if instead of using the word supernatural to describe what we don't understand, we simply used unexplainable, that would be far better. In any case, in the story I'm about to tell, it was mainly the preliminary circumstances that impressed me. Here are the facts. At the time, I was a judge in Ajaccio, a small white town at the edge of a bay surrounded by tall mountains. Most of the cases I presided over were about revenge. Some were grand, dramatic, fierce, even heroic. We encountered the most splendid motives for vengeance one could imagine. Centuries-old feuds, sometimes dormant but never extinguished. Cruel plots, killings that became massacres, almost acts of glory. For 2 years, I heard only of bloodshed and the terrible Corsican custom of revenge, not just against the offender, but against all his descendants and relatives. I saw elderly men, children, and distant cousins murdered. My mind was filled with these stories. One day, I knew that an Englishman had just rented a small villa at the end of the bay for several years. Very soon, this peculiar man who lived alone and only went out to hunt or fish stirred great curiosity. He never spoke to anyone, never visited town, and every morning practiced shooting with his revolver and rifle for 1 or 2 hours. Legends began to form around him. Some claimed he was an important figure fleeing his country for political reasons. Others said he was hiding after committing a terrible crime, even mentioning particularly gruesome details. In my position, I found it necessary to gather information about the man, but it was impossible to learn anything. His name was Sir John Roll, so I limited myself to observing him discreetly. But nothing in his behavior seemed suspicious. However, as the rumors continued to grow, I decided to try to get closer to this stranger. I began hunting regularly near his property. It took time to find an opportunity, But one day it came when I shot a partridge that fell right in front of the Englishman. My dog retrieved it, but I walked over to Sir John Rowell, apologized, and offered him the bird. He was a tall and strong man with red hair and beard, a true Hercules, but with calm and courteous manners. He lacked the usual British stiffness and, with a strong English accent, thanked me warmly for the gesture. After that, we spoke several times. One evening, while passing in front of his house, I saw him sitting in the garden, smoking his pipe. He invited me in for a beer. I accepted without hesitation. He welcomed me with the most meticulous English courtesy, praised France and Corsica, and declared himself in love with the land. Very carefully, I began asking about his life and future plans. He answered without hesitation, saying he had traveled extensively in Africa, India, and America. He added, laughing, "I've lived many adventures." Then I mentioned hunting, and he shared fascinating details about hunting hippopotamuses, tigers, elephants, and even gorillas. I asked, "Are all those animals dangerous?" He smiled. "Oh no, man is the worst of them." And then he burst into hearty laughter, the satisfied laugh of a calm Englishman. "I've also hunted many men." Then he started talking about weapons and invited me to see his collection. But something in the room caught my attention. In the center of the main wall, against a background of red velvet, was a hand. A human hand. It wasn't a white, clean skeleton, but a black, shriveled hand, with yellow nails, visible tendons, and traces of dried blood on the bones, as if it had been chopped off with an axe. A massive iron chain was embedded in the wrist and secured it to the wall with a solid iron ring, strong enough to hold back an elephant. I asked, "What is that?" Sir John answered calmly, "That is my worst enemy." After that, I began visiting him more often, but eventually I stopped going. People had grown used to him, and the curiosity had faded. 1 year passed. One morning, my servant woke me, announcing that Sir John Rowell had been murdered during the night. I went to his house with the authorities and found his body stretched out in the middle of the room. His face was black and twisted in terror. In his mouth, we found a human finger, bitten off at the second joint. The horrible hand that had been mounted on the wall was gone. Despite thorough investigations, we never found the culprit. But 3 months later, a gravedigger discovered the hand at the cemetery, lying on Sir John Rowell's grave. The finger that had been torn off by the dead man's teeth was still missing. And that, ladies, is my story. The women, pale and trembling, exclaimed, "But that's not an explanation. What do you think really happened?" The judge smiled. "I believe the true owner of the hand was not dead. He came to retrieve it. But how, I don't know. It was a kind of revenge." One woman murmured, "That can't be. There should be something more." And the judge, still smiling, replied, "I warned you my explanation wouldn't satisfy you.